Hello again, welcome back to another round of the Crazyhouse World Championship. This time we have an elimination match between LegionDestroyer and ArtOfDeception. So this is for a spot in the candidates. This is the final round of the elimination bracket. And there are still 4 candidates to be decided, and one of them will be at the end of this 10-game match. So 10 games of 3+2 Crazyhouse. And we have an advanced French with knight e7, bishop g5, and early h6, g5. And Legion has responded h4. So jumping forwards with the knight to g5, you would probably expect a trade on g3 at some point when the square f6 is a little better defended. No need to rush into this trade though. Knight takes g3. Perhaps just bishop g7 first. Legion could also play bishop b5 check and try to trade a piece this way for f6. Potentially the e3 square is a little concerning if knight takes g3 ever happens. I wonder if anyone's noticed. Nobody here yet. So bishop h6. Perhaps the idea here is to allow something to land on f6. Like if knight f6 eventually, then just king f8. So yeah, as Clearcast is saying in the game chat, take on g3 and then stick it right back on e3. Or is the simple threat just bishop takes g5? Well, not yet, because then there would be a bishop at f6 and bishop takes rook to follow. And just checking the mic is not on mute again like it was earlier today. Katas saying knight takes h4 is also another idea. So just getting rid of the defender on g5, but yeah, it's always a worry that something's going to land on f6. Hello, okay, we're back for another round. This time, I don't know what time it was last time, must have been about 2 AM last time you were watching. Have you had any sleep? You seem to have been up a while. So knight d7, intending to cover this square f6 a little more. I wonder if he wants to go c6 in case of bishop b5 and just allow the weakening of these dark squares on d6. Whereas normally you put the bishop on d3, but then it looks like black can just steal a pawn with knight takes d4. Okay, well, we've got some action here. What's happening? Knight takes d5, e takes, and e6. So f takes, what's happening? Does he want to go knight takes e6 and then queen e7, queen e2? You would assume queen e2 is the natural response to queen e7. And then there is a big threat to take on f7 with check, or d7 with check. f7 looks even stronger though. So what's wrong with queen e2? That's my question. What is black's response to queen e2? F takes e6, knight takes e6, and then do you just have to allow knight takes c7 check and, I don't know, put something in the way? Pawn at e4, for example, knight at e4. No, he hasn't gone queen e2. What was he afraid of? Was there going to be a bishop? No, I'm really not sure. Was he afraid of knight takes d4? But he takes f7. King d8, queen trade. Well, the knight on d4 does cover. I just can't really believe that that's working though. So we had pawn at f7 check, king d8, bishop takes knight on f5. A trade on g5. This looks overwhelming for white now. Knight at g6, just pick up the rook in the corner. It does help to prevent e takes f5 with check, because then you go knight takes queen. There are also other ways to play. I mean, oh no, he sacked a bishop. Was that necessary? Ah, he's after pawn at g7. Okay. Yeah, that is hard to deal with. I'm not sure where the rook is going. I think it has to go somewhere. That doesn't help very much. Just pawn up to c3. Okay, whatever. The knight might have been useful, but never mind about that. Okay, just take the rook and stick it back on. Ah, so he's allowed the promotion. No instant threat. So he's threatening to do a fake queen trade with queen g5. Doesn't help taking this because the bishop is pinned. I wonder how long is this queen going to survive? Yeah, I don't know whether all this was necessary with bishop g5 and bishop takes f6. I can understand he wants pawn at g7. Maybe Legion just overestimated the strength of this whole plan. Hello Zveta. So rook at e2. I mean, eventually, surely he's going to sack his queen. It is a fake queen, don't forget. It is a fake queen. So he sacked it for the knight. But how can he get in? I mean, these minor piece drops were very effective from Art. Because now it looks like black has the material advantage with a safe king. He's given up another queen. I mean the real queen. And that's it. There's going to be... Oh, hang on, that's not mate. There's a bishop covering backwards on h2. So he can just step across, but then queen takes bishop. Or whatever. Queen takes bishop I think was also fine. Yeah, I mean the light squares as well. Yeah, that's it. But unlucky Legion, I thought he was doing really well. Hello Gingerbread Man, welcome. I've got a midnight stream here in Sydney. So it's only the first game out of 10, but it's not so good to lose the first one with the white pieces. I did the same against Master Tan in my match last week. I lost the first two and then came back. So, I think Legion would be fairly happy with the opening in that game, but something went wrong when he just... I don't know what happened. He pulled the trigger too early, or he sacked too many pieces. He got too excited having a fake queen on the board, perhaps. Yes, Genna, Mugwort staying up for the commentary. Well, I'm sort of on school holidays at the moment, so I have to make an appearance at the office tomorrow at no particular time. Thanks for the follow, Yash Metyam. So what do we have? I've kind of ignored the opening, but I have seen Art do this before with a quiet bishop e2, and then he had some games against T-Cubes, where T-Cubes did this typical knight f4, and it's always threatening to sack on g2. So d4 really entices the sack on g2. Pawn at g4 is the usual response, and then that weakens d4. And otherwise, you just take here and put knight on h4 check, and take the bishop and draw the queen out, and then keep harassing the queen. But yeah, if you can get rid of the knight on f3, then knight takes d4 is usually very helpful for black. Do you have any title? Yeah, FM, Fishy Master. No, not a real title. Or is it Fake Master? There's so many words you can use for FM. Too easy for black to play. I agree, it is very easy for black to play. I'm just thinking I'm more used to the bishop already being out on c4, or perhaps b5. because the lines I'm thinking of, white doesn't even get to play knight g5 at all. Maybe it's when the bishop is already on e7. I can't even think now why that's the case. Perhaps white hasn't played d4 yet, and some lines that I'm thinking of. Alright, so as I was saying, it is very helpful for this knight takes d4 to happen. It gains tempo on the queen. If the queen backs off, you don't need to say what black is going to do next. Pretty obvious. So, Cat Percher saying in the game chat perhaps it was better not to save the knight but back the king off and take back with the bishop and maybe stick the pawn back on g2 for safety. Yeah, how safe is white in reality? Can he afford to move the queen and... oh no, he's gone all in for the attack. But he doesn't have a knight check, so the pawn at f7, surely the king is safe on d7. I can't see what's wrong unless... oh, he's got all the knight checks covered. Just the game chat is better on Leechess, so I'm trying to follow the game chat as well as the Twitch chat. Yeah, so a move like rook d1 check is possible, but as long as you don't block on d6, then you'd be looking at bishop at d5 because it's the most forcing, but then it does allow rook takes, pawn takes, bishop at g4 defending. So the bishop will be useful when the king runs back to h1. So perhaps just pawn at d5. Would it be an option to play bishop d6 and then allow knight at c5 check and run the king to e7? Because then that expires all white's knights, so there's no knight at g8 to worry about in that case. But then, after rook takes f3, do you really have anything? So he has gone bishop d6. I wonder what the plan is. Really not sure what the plan is for either player. So I would expect an eventual rook takes f3 because you have to find a way to stop knight h4. Obviously getting rid of the knight is one way to do it. There may be other tricky ways that I haven't thought of. King h1 doesn't work, rook g1 doesn't look like it works. Wow, king takes was unexpected. But there may be some reason why rook takes fails, like queen at g4 and then some sequence of pawn drops. So king takes f3. I would normally just instantly check from a distance here, so it just gets another pawn in hand. So pawn at g4, take, and then look for mate. The bishop does cover some squares, so it stops moves like queen g5. So if the king is out on g4, queen at f5 check, oh, that's mate in one, isn't it? So if you draw the king to g4, then you're threatening queen at f5 mate. So what's wrong with just bishop at... okay, bishop at g4 is also fine. The king cannot go here because of queen at f4, so king e3 fails. And then just pawn somewhere. That'll do. Rook at... oh yeah, queen at f3 and rook at h4 is the fastest way. Alright, Legion's back on track here. Win with black. Very convincing win with black, I have to say. So I don't think that queen was ever safe on f3. I think Art will have to find a way to completely avoid that in the next few games. So yeah, we get a same opening again, a French defense with an early bishop g5, h6 g5, knight f3. So in the previous game we saw g4, knight g5, and then bishop h6. And black was looking for a way to get rid of this knight on g5 without trading too many pieces and allowing a bishop, for example, to land back on f6. So same again, Art hasn't found anything better. I mean, I'd be looking at bishop g7, a bit more defensive, just covering the square f6. Yeah, he did this last time as well, knight d7. Ah, that's interesting. Deepak's talking to me in the game chat, not the Twitch chat. So yes, I am watching both chats at once. So knight d7. And I was saying before, what's the intention on bishop b5? I would assume black is going to play c6 and then what? Bishop e2. But then can you take on g3 and then stick the bishop back on e3 because the square f6 is better defended? But yeah, no need to move the bishop at all. Knight c3 I think worked out very well with this idea to sack on d5 and push. So Art stopped it this time, so that's why he's kept the bishop on f8, hasn't committed the bishop to any square on the other diagonal, so bishop b4. And I would assume that he wants to trade here quickly and stick the knight on e4, although perhaps then white can just trade and put the knight back on g5. So, well, I thought black wanted to trade anyway. I don't think there was any need to play a3 if there was a more useful move, like moving the bishop out somewhere. He's gone back. Okay, so he was only feigning at exchanging for the knight. Well, that's interesting. I just can't quite remember the position where Legion sacked the knight. It must have been very similar to this one, but when the bishop was on h6 instead. So it was knight takes, pawn takes, e6. So what's the hesitation in doing the same thing again? It looks good to me. I don't think this move c5 is going to help black. I mean, now there's a big hole for a knight on c7, or a pawn even on c7. The immediate threat is just pawn at c7, as well as many other threats, as you can see. I mean, a typical way to counter that in Bughouse is bishop at a5 check, but black does not have a bishop in hand. So, and there's no queen e7. I mean, last game I thought queen e2 was a good response. Oh yeah, that's a good idea, ClickCast. How come I never thought of that before? If you type in the game chat, and then I will see it immediately, and I'll be able to comment. So that's why I'm talking about some of Katask's move and Cat Poacher. So bishop takes g5. There is a choice which piece to take. f7 attacks the king more than e takes d7. But then I think it's a good idea to not allow this queen e7 check at all. So, well, he's allowed it, but there'll be so many pieces guarding the square f6 after, for example, bishop at e5. So knight at e6 instead. So hitting the bishop on f4, also defending the square c7. Probably bishop at e5 here. I guess Legion is looking at a more forceful play with bishop at f6. Knight takes f4, bishop takes d8. Not exactly sure what the threat is though. Katask also suggesting knight at f6, and what happens then if queen takes, pawn takes, knight takes f4? Still you have to get rid of the knight. I mean, you don't have a knight in hand. You have a pawn for g7. So this move is very helpful, stopping knight at f6 check. So Legion's gone the other way, so the move I didn't really pay attention to is bishop at c1. Purely just defending the other bishop on f4 and stopping any potential pawn at d2. So a trade on d6, knight at e4. And then, doesn't seemed to make a lot of sense playing pawn at e7 because the queen just comes out this way with a check. Oh, there he's gone. He's done it anyway. I've just said it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it's interesting line with queen a5 check b4 take. There's an option to take with the bishop. So I'd be looking at playing b4 if I was white. And I mean, it does weaken the square c3 for a knight here, but I think white's attack seems much faster. You could even just hop the queen out of the way, something like queen d3, and not even allow knight takes d1 at all. So there we go, bishop takes b4. Probably sack the queen and bishop at c3, then take on b4, try and get rid of this pawn on e7. Noting that the square c7, it's quite important that the knight is guarding c7. But black, he's going in this way, okay. So the other bishop covers d2. I think white will have to take this. Drawing the knight away from d6. So what happens on knight at d6, queen takes, bishop takes, with the knight sitting out here on g3? It's a lot of pieces in hand, 2 knights, pawn, bishop. I can understand why Legion didn't want to go for that. But there is a knight at c3. Take, king d2. Just knight takes queen. White doesn't have a threat. I think this is winning for black. There's a threat to play queen at e1 check. There's also queen c3 check. That's a lot to cover. Rook takes d1. But I think bishop, no, not bishop at c3. Queen takes c, he wants to play queen takes c2 and then pawn at d3 to mate. This is mate in 2. Oh, sorry, not mate in 2. Alright, mate in 3. Yeah, pawn at f4, very nice. Wow, so the Legion there really punished on the square f2. So that came all of a sudden. I thought black was going to sack the queen and go for this bishop at c3, but no, the attack very suddenly came in the other direction. So I'm still a bit confused about this move order. So it's knight f4 castles, pawn at h3, g takes, knight takes, king h1, knight c6. So d4 it doesn't quite look like the previous game. Or did the previous game go pawn at g2, then knight f4, and then d4? Yeah, that was it. Because if the king has to move twice to get to g2, surely that's just a waste of time. It's already moved once, and then last game there was a sack on g2, and it moved a second time to get to g2. That's after it castled. So d3 instead, noting that last time pawn at g4 was an issue, just dropping the pawn cold on d4. So this is one of these lines where knight g5 is not an option, because the knight is still here, it's still on the board, the material balance is still equal at the moment. So, in this sort of position, yeah, I was about to say knight e1 is a typical response. So immediately threatening bishop takes g4, and then I would expect h5 from Legion. Another option... Yeah, I was going to say queen h4 or queen d4, but there's enough pawns to block out the queen. So bishop c5 more aggressive, going for knight takes f2. So one idea of this is, well, you're hoping for pawn at e3, blocking out the bishop on c1. But knight e4 seems like a better move in response to bishop c5. Also just keeping the pawns in hand in case the queen comes forward. That's interesting. I assume, well, pawn at g2. I wonder what Legion's planning. Is he really planning what I'm thinking he's planning? Yeah, Katask is guessing it in the chat as well. Well, he's got all the squares here covered. Knight's guarding d8, bishop's guarding d7. So if he wants to sack the queen, now's the time to do it. It's interesting that black has won all the games so far. 3 out of 3 for black. So yeah, I mean, otherwise bishop takes g4 is coming, so he's committed to it. Knight takes f2, take, perhaps knight out of the way. What about knight d3? Gotta find some way to cover the square g1. And Legion has noticed that pawn at d7, bishop takes, counter queen sack. The bishop covers the square c5 backwards, so there's no knight at c5 check. So yeah, I was expecting knight d3. I wonder if Legion just wants to try to pick up some material with the rook at g1 check, queen takes, bishop takes, and hope he has something after king takes bishop. What does he have left? Pawn, knight, queen. So the knight on d3. It kind of reminds me last game of that knight on e6 defending everything. So okay, he's done it. And now Art has to work out if he can safely capture this bishop, or is it just too much? Too much to hope for. Pawn at f3 might be a good response. King takes bishop, pawn at f3. Yeah. And I saw that just before Cliffcast typed it in the chat. If he's watching, he'll hear it 20 seconds or so later. Other choices for white. Cat Perch is saying an interesting move, bishop h6, clearing the first rank. I would still continue to attack on the light squares in that case. GSVC is pointing out that knight at g3 check is a threat. It is also similarly a threat, even if the first rank is cleared. So can't take with the h pawn, queen at h2's mate. If king takes bishop, then queen at h1 check, king f2. What is GSVC intending? Knight takes e4 check, king e3. Ah, okay, mated by assumption. Now, this is an interesting move. Queen at h4, what's the big idea? Doesn't seem to create a mating threat, so he's just stopping stuff on g3 and h2. So the bishop kind of gets in the way at the moment. What about pawn at h3 anyway? And then if g takes, you hope something will happen. Mate by hope. It's similar to mate by assumption. And bishop g5 also does not create a mating threat. The knight covers at the moment, so again, pawn at h3, I don't know, it just feels like it's running out of steam. G takes h3, only a knight and queen, they're not the pieces that you need. Pawn at c4 looks awfully slow. Pawn at e7, is he going to have to take this? I don't think this works. Well, can't exactly refute it, but knight takes first. I was just looking more at rook at f8 check. Alright, so keeping safe, the knight's still on the board, defending f2. This just covers g7. I wonder if Art's going to go for it and go knight at f6 check. No, knight f4, just getting rid of the queen this way. I suppose Legion really has to be all in here and just take the knight on. No, there's a mate threat though. Knight takes g6 is a mate threat. So he has to keep defending the square g7. Was that meant to be a rook? Oh no, there was a mate threat on e7. It's too much to cover everything. So I thought queen at h4 was actually a really good defensive move. Just leaving the bishop on g1, making Legion waste time, and then with the knight on d3, there are a lot of pieces defending this all-important squares g1 and f2. So Art noticed the tricky GSVC knight at g3 check, and it sort of looked like there were some vague attacking ideas, but yeah, needed a few tempi like bishop g5 and pawn at e7 to really make it work. And it didn't really matter how many rooks and knights Legion had in hand. There were no counter-attacking opportunities. Thank you for the follow, Dag. You can't say that. Dag, you downstairs. Dag guy downstairs. Alright, so we see a d4 opening this time. Art has fianchettoed the scoreline, by the way, is 3-1 in favor of Art. So Legion has decided to switch it up. And Art, I see, hasn't gone for his favorite setup with e6 and b6. A different kind of fianchetto. This is going to be a much slower game than the previous few. Why is Legion playing like GSVC, says the man himself. So I wouldn't hesitate if I was black. I'd just go pawn h3 and try and do something on the king side. But no, we see bishop takes knight, trying to slow down knight c e5, I guess, trying to get a stranglehold over this square on e5. Pawn at d5, bishop comes back. Both sides are going to try and stick the knights on e4 and e5, I would assume. So Legion does have a pawn in hand. Maybe he's just waiting to see if knight e4 comes and then put the pawn on d3. Don't really know what his intentions are at the moment. It's a fairly balanced position. A bishop c7 may look good, but the queen is just easily sidestepping, and then bishop doesn't do a lot. Hello, Pepe. Bishop at h3. Seems like he's trying to gain access to h5 for a knight, so this trade does seem to favor white. So that's why we see the knight on f taking on g3. And still almost equal, I would say. Well, I mean, black just seems to have tiny little gap on d6 and e7. You'd hardly call it a gap though, something to take advantage of, because you need to get rid of this knight first, but then if you play pawn at d3 and the knight comes back, then I don't know, perhaps it's a little something then to put the knight on e5. But Legion's allowed this knight to survive. And let's see, so a lot of these pieces here, I'm not quite sure what their role is in the game. So queen b6. Only idea seems to take on b2. Would you, counter this threat first before you try and crack open the king side? GSVC saying he prefers to attack and let the pawn go, and I assume he wants to sack on e6. Well, you get the piece back. Knight takes, bishop takes, and then take on d7. If rook f7, probably just keep pressing forwards with bishop takes. Trade off a few more pieces. Because then, if you can trade queens, that would be really helpful. With the queen down on b2, that is. Or trap the queen somehow. Or rook b1, rook b7 is also useful if the king's drawn out to f7. Alright, that's another story. We see knight at f4, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, knight at g5. So preventing, for the moment, this sack on He did not sack b2. Yeah, no, I said you win the material back. I was agreeing with you. I mean, I think if rook f7 is the only move to save the knight on d7, then that's surely just busted. So bishop at h4. And what's the main threat? The main threat seems to be take on e4 first and then take on g5. And then go for the sack. So knight f3, gf3. Knight d2. Is the queen going to come back to d1? He certainly doesn't want to trade queens when there's a knight takes f3 check possible. Yeah, queen d1. Queen takes b2, rook c2, knight f3, queen f3, queen c2. And then I think Legion just has to go for it somehow. So knight takes e6 enough. Bishop at e4 is a good response. It's a bit too slow to play knight takes e6. He's gone bishop takes. What's the big idea? Does he want to check here and then check twice on g? Well, the bishop covers g6 as well as hitting the queen. But probably just king h7 is the safest move for Art. Uh-oh, big problems. Is there any way not to sack the queen? Calling on Genner. Genner's good at sacking queens. He did it many times against Jan. Seemed to work out well. Bishop at g2, I suppose. And then are we going to see some counter sack or just slow play? Pawn at f3, pawn at g2. So at least this is forcing the issue, but yeah, sidestepping around this pawn on g2. I think this is the right way to go. And Art has surely got this if he checks in the right sequence. I probably start drawing the king out this way. Although, yeah, rook at, well, why not rook at d1? Okay, if he's seen a forced mate, but otherwise why not rook at d1, make him block with something and then take it. Yeah, I mean, this is good enough. This is good enough. Probably. Rook at g1. Queen f1 check. No, the blocker on g2. But look at that bishop on g7 has just sat there the whole game from about move 4. Can't get in. I mean, knight at e1 check, as Saturas is saying, was another option. And then queen takes f3. But this threat of pawn at g4 is just too strong now. Surely that's the end. Queen at f5, last attempt. Trade queens, pawn at... What? He's flagged him. You just had to take it. I mean, what other choice was there? And pawn at g6. I mean, what other move could he possibly have been thinking about? I don't know. I mean, the queen was just hanging there. I mean, surely you're not going to move the king and allow queen takes f3. I mean, I think a big part of it was maybe he got overconfident playing rook at e1 check when he could have just dropped from a distance and then sacked and gained another piece in hand. Yeah, everyone in the game chat saying these flags should not be allowed to happen in 3+2. Holy smokes. The comeback is real. Always give one more check, yeah. Well, amazing. I thought it would be game over after h5 and pawn to g4 coming. Queen takes f3 better, was the rook at h1 made in 5. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to check it now. Rook h1 also looked very good. But yeah, I'm not going to check it right now. So let's just stick with the action. H5. I don't remember that happening last game. Oh yeah, because Legion played more aggressively with bishop c5. Maybe he just got stuck after queen and h4 in the 2 games ago with the same colours, not knowing what to do after with the bishop sitting there on g1. So he's gone h5, and not saying this is unaggressive. Is that a word? Certainly h5 is thematic, and just trying to put as many pawns on light squares as you can. So knight d4, getting rid of this bishop on e2 is usually very helpful, and then you can perhaps stick it back on c6, or just keep it off board waiting for the right time. Because if you play bishop c6 too early, then it's easy to block out with pawn on e4. So, knight d4, Art is thinking. He's probably thinking about the previous game. That's what I would be doing if I was him. And then when I get down to 1 minute, I'll be like, alright, I've got to focus on this game. Game number 6. Forget about the previous game. I mean, he's still got the break of serve, so to speak. He's got the white pieces here. Just that white is not doing very well in this series. So Pepelo saying, I went h5 against PKR yesterday. The moment I moved my bishop out, he went pawn at h6. It was really annoying. Yeah, so he means moving the bishop from f8, I assume. But in this particular line, you notice how black has not sacked the knight yet. So typically pawn at h6 is more useful when there's a knight at g7 and bishop takes h6 to follow. And yeah, white can take the knight on h3. Yeah, no, I didn't think that was a quick move. I just thought he had to play queen takes f5 and pawn at g6. Like, what other move would you be thinking of? But I didn't think there was a quick mate. Not when it got to that point. Earlier on, there would have surely black would have missed a mate. So pawn at g2, knight d4, bishop e3, knight e2, queen e2, bishop b4, and now f3. Again, it's saying I have some games with bishop d6 at h6, bishop back to f8. I assume you don't mean in this exact position though, because white doesn't have much ammo. So bishop b4, f3. f3. Oh, I'll never forget my game against Figlude when I made the mistake of playing f3. It's a different position, but then he pushed g3, and I went h takes g3 and h4, and then I was dead a few minutes later. Nah, not in this exact position though. Alright, so what's happening? fg4, hg4, bishop b6. So he wants a bishop for f7. I assume he wants to play pawn at g6, takes, and then bishop at f7 check. And that's why white is initiating the trades on b6. Okay, black to play. What do you do? It's really crunch time for Legion if he goes down here. Well, 4-2, very hard to come back. So he's blocked off the f file. This bishop on c8 is the only piece that's saving him at the moment. King f8, otherwise knight at f7 looks potentially painful, even though he could still come back to f8 after knight at f5 check. But perhaps knight at d5 is also a problem with knight takes b4 coming. I was just worried about knight at h7. Knight at h7 check. Is Legion intending just to go king e7 then and claim that the two pieces here are not actually doing anything? So bishop takes e6, bishop c3. Taking that just looks too dangerous. There's no counterattack. So king e7, but then bishop takes c8. Oh, painful. Bishop takes g4 instead. Okay. Clicker saying queen takes e5 in the chat. Does it work? Can I run out to d6? What's the idea? Rook f7 check. Alright, so black to play. I think Art's defending much better in the last two white games. There's queen on g4 covering g2. What's the main threat? Knight at f5, covered by the bishop. He's got a blocker for c5 in case he needs it. So pawn at f5 instead. Another one of these art moves that are very hard to predict. Yeah, I mean, I would have gone bishop takes c8 as Pepe was saying, and I said before, that was my first thought. He still has a pawn for c5. So I don't understand this check. Can black just pick up another piece here? Look for opportunities to pick up a rook, but does it mate? Why is he doing this? Was that forced? Hang on, I don't understand. What is it? Was there some threat that I missed? Why didn't he just pick up another piece? Why did he have to sack a rook on h7? I don't understand that. Well, it's just desperation with 7 seconds left. I can see that he's trying to poke a hole on g3. He's got knight at h5 check, picking up a queen. If he comes back, you might as well play the check here first. Yeah, and then h1 is hard to cover after knight takes queen. What? He's picked up a pawn. He's preferred a pawn over queen. That's very true to Legion style. Very artistic. May not be the best move though. I hope this doesn't come back to haunt Legion. So pawn at f2, giving up the other rook. Ah, no, defending, blocking on... okay, now he's picked up the queen. But there's a rook at c8 check. Queen takes, king takes. Uh-oh, I thought that might have been mate. Yeah. It's not queen. I don't know. I don't know what's going on anymore. It was a promoted pawn. Oh, the one on g7. Are you talking about the one on g7 was a promoted pawn? Okay, so it was the same thing. Yeah, I see. Hang on, there's no diagonals. This game is insane. So forcing a unless he can play king b7, king c6. King b7. Ah, Legion, no. Alright, but king b7. Rook and knight didn't do much. Still king b7. Yeah. And then now black is winning. Oh, that's incredible. I was so sure that queen sack on b7 will lead to mate. Oh, what a game. And I thought that rook at c8 check and trading the queens that way. And if king a7, then there was a knight at b5 check. King a6, rook takes... Ah, it's too crazy. Wow. So back to 3 games all. Incredible. After Art missed the checkmates in the previous game too. So perhaps not many people saw the Master Tan versus Shabrat match earlier, but the scoreline 6 games to 1 to Master Tan certainly did not reflect the chances that Shabrat had. I think there were 3 games in a row where he missed forced mates. So GSVC saying, I don't know why Legion didn't just go king b7. That's was my first thought. No diagonals. I was even suggesting the daring run b7 when he after rook at a4 check instead of blocking with the pawn, but perhaps he had it all worked out. Maybe. Don't know how much he can work out with 5 seconds. So this is one of my original suggestions when I first saw this. I thought bishop g7 would help to cover the f6 square. You can see this square has been protected now 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't necessarily say that black is ready to castle though, because of the weakness on the square h7. And yeah, why not? Why not? I thought he was even going to play queen takes, and then bishop at h5, queen f4. Look pretty solid. But okay, well, I wasn't expecting this at all. Pawn at g6. A similar idea to take on e6 and then trying to pick up a ton of material if the queen moves. So Art's going to have to come up with some counterattack here because he can't afford to drop so much material. But then knight takes g3, you'd even consider knight takes g7 check first. This one, I don't know, my first thought is king f1, oh no, probably not. If there's some check on f8, I don't know. Oh, knight c3 is fine. Give him a knight, just don't let him do what he did in game number 3. I think game number 3 was that big attack on f2 when the knight was on e4. Yep, so c7 defended now. Did Legion just sack a piece? It felt like he just sacked a piece on f6. Knight takes, queen takes, bishop at f6. Or had he already sacked? Oh, he had already sacked a piece. He's just sacked another pawn, has he? So I guess Legion's first thought was bishop e5, and he's just double checking himself. Because pawn at e5 and knight at f6, king d8 doesn't seem to get anywhere. So bishop e5, queen... Well, nothing wrong with queen e6, the knight covers g7. It's a bit hard to get rid of this knight. So what would you do after queen e6? Could go knight at c5, but it's not really doing much except pushing the queen back to e7. And then pawn at e6, I don't know, it feels a bit clunky. So Art is not interested in pinning the bishop for some reason. Maybe queen e2 was also an idea. But instead pawn at e3. So I'd be very skeptical about taking this and allowing bishop at f2 check. Or can you just take everything as long as there's no double check? Alright, what would I do here? Panic. Take the queen. I was about to say take the queen. King f1, can he get away with it? Knight at g3 check, king g1 take, king h2, knight at f1 check, rook takes, knight takes, queen takes, something at g3 is going to mate. So take. Yeah, this is mate by assumption. I think it is too much though. It's too many knights. If there was only one knight, then perhaps knight at f4, you could play king f1, draw the knight to e3. Even then, it's getting a queen with check. So bishop takes c3 was the killer to get an extra knight. I mean, just knight e3 forces a queen with check. And without the extra knight it still works. But no, this is just a direct mate, bishop at e3, pawn f2. Yeah, so a very strong attack from Art, allowing this bishop e5, and very timely with pawn at e3. Smells matey, yep. So 4 games to 3, another win for black. 2 wins for black in a row. And 5 in total out of 7 in the match. So we see a Scotch that's transposed to a 4-knight Scotch. What are the options here? Bishop b4, knight takes knight, pawn at e5 I'm not so familiar with. So he's trying to claim that knight to f5 is not so effective with the bishop still on f8. And then you typically counterattack with d5 if knight f5. Knight trade, probably just go into the queen trade, that seems okay for black. But no, he's taken with the b pawn. Yeah, I don't mind trading queens, allowing bishop g5 and rook d1 check. You stick something on d4. Seems to hold the position quite comfortably. Alright, black to play. What's he going to do with his bishop on c8? Yeah, might as well start with rook b8 and keep everything at home for the moment. So there's no need, it's kind of a trap for beginners to develop your pieces too quickly and then you're just allowing weaknesses on g7 and h6. So don't bother developing, keep all your pieces at home and repel the attack. Free pawn, CWC wants to take on b2. So not afraid of the sack, king takes f7, pawn at e6, check. What does he want to take on with the king on e6? I don't know. I mean, knight at d6 is obviously safer. Bishop b3 covers the pawn, but then there's bishop a6. So this piece has come into play, but is knight c5 a good response? What happens on knight at c5? Yeah, king takes e6, of course. Then I'll trade the house, bishop takes f6. Alright, so rook sack on b3, but then what's he doing on rook takes a6? Bishop c8, of course. I just said it a millisecond before he played it. Alright, rook takes a7. But then you sack on f2 and then go knight... you don't have knight g4. You do have knight takes e4. Knight takes. So that's the purpose of the knight on d6, right? So you tempt the rook to a7, play bishop at b6, sack on f2, and then go knight g takes e4 check. Alright, none of that stuff now, of course. So bishop at b6 anyway, you would think. No, h6. Art is really not interested in a free pawn. Alright. Understandable. He wants to save his bishop and not allow any sort of counterattack. I don't know whether the counterattack was real with so many pieces on the back rank. Yeah, I would have been very tempted to trade on f6 and go rook takes a7. Alright, he's finally done it. Legion has not a single piece in hand. What about just go for it? Bishop... but bishop takes f takes. Even bishop at e3 can be answered by bishop at f2. Take. You can fork the rooks. I wonder if that's any good. I don't know. Just fantasy. And if h takes, then you keep pushing with h4. But no, he seems to want Art to take him first so he can get these three pawns together in a steamroller. But again, very similar to the previous game, he's allowed this counterattack next to the king. And I'm favouring white just like I favoured Art's attack in the previous game. That there are just too many pieces. It's too late to start defending with the bishop because you can just take and replace the pawn on g6. So he's borrowed a chapter from his opponent and taken with the king. I'm sure there was some game where Art did this. And that was game number... This is game 8. Must have been game number 4. Where Art played king takes f3. Alright, so knight at e5 check. Do you just step back to e8? Is it too dangerous to allow a rook at g6 check? King h7. What happens then? Pawn at f7 anyway. You're going to have to sack the bishop in any case. But now probably bishop at g6 and then just trade the house. Whoa, wasn't expecting this. Hang on. King e7. I might as well throw in some rook e1 or queen e2. Oh, does rook at e8 look good? Just go rook at e8. Take. Is there an... Yeah, there's a mate threat with knight at f6 check. Knight at f6 check is made in a few, I think. This also works with knight at e6 check. Rook d7. What? Queen c7 first. Yeah, and pawn at f7. Alright, whatever. Yeah, so it didn't really matter, I think, at that stage. Although the pawns look nice on h4, g5, f4, there just wasn't enough time to push them. It's all about timing. Art is just getting in too fast. What is Saxit? That's a difficult question to answer. You really have to have a bit of a history playing Bughouse, you know, the two board version of this game, to really know the art of the Saxit. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you talk about Saxitting in Crazyhouse. The Bughouse is a game which is time dependent and you're relying on your partner to feed you when you're ahead on time. Whereas in Crazyhouse you have to feed yourself. You're self-sufficient. So that's why you could say it's a little more chess-like than Bughouse. Because it's a game of complete control in the sense that you don't have a partner where they're doing some random things on the other board, and you don't have to micromanage anybody. It's just you and your opponent, and you can calculate what you take and what you get back, and what they take and what they get back. So Cat Perch is pointing out these plays that guys have played that opening a lot. Is it 4 times or 5 times? Game number 9 must be 4 times, because Legion played d4 in game 5, I think. So I don't remember this queen d2 move. What's this all about? It's a way to guard the square e3. It's a way to protect the knight. What's he going to do to protect e4? Again, it says Mugwort sounds like someone who suffered a lot in the random pool. I don't know, I think I suffer in any pool. No, I think in Bughouse I just need someone who understands the way I play. Yeah, when John Lee and I play a lot, we don't need to do a lot of communication. I mean, having a voice chat also helps. I just can't use the buttons, because every time I use the buttons, my partner does, especially in the random pool, just does the opposite to what I say. So better just to say nothing. Alright, bishop takes h6. What was on h6? I wasn't watching. Was it a bishop? Bishop f4, queen b6. Legion's gone for this knight sack again. Bishop takes, rook takes. There must be a big idea. Or is Legion sacking first and then thinking? So, one thing in Crazyhouse, you could say sack sitting is kind of like where you sack first and then you think later, because it looks like you're sitting, right? So you sack first and then you're not really sure, you just have some feeling that it might be good, and then you look for an idea later. But it just looks like you're sitting for more pieces. So GSVC wanted to sack everything. No, someone's saying sack the queen on h6. Was it Saturus? Can't you just go bishop at f8 and cover the knight on h6? Alright, bishop d3, getting rid of this knight. So now, calculation time. Can you afford to trade queens allow knight at c4 and then run this way? King e1, pawn at d2, king f1. No, Legion doesn't think so. I would have taken another look at that. So has Legion got anything to play for? Well, I mean, it's a very airy king. This bishop e2 at f4 is pretty useful. I think Legion played queen d2 just because he didn't want to suffer on f2 like he did in the past couple of games. So even though Legion is a bishop down and a pawn, yeah, I mean, there's ideas of knight at c7 as well. He might end up picking up 2 rooks. I don't think Art's going to allow this though. So if I was to try to predict what Art's going to do, some funny knight move to cover everything. Knight at f7. No, he's moved the queen back. So probably just play knight at c7 straight away. Any better ideas than knight at c7 check? You could play possibly rook at e6, yeah, but then there's only a queen. A queen by itself isn't that much, unless you can sack the knight, sack the other queen, then you get 2 pawns and play c4. No, that's too much. Leave the other queen on the board at least and do something with the pawn and the queen. No, I think rook at e6 was sacking too much. Yeah, this is a much better way to play. Knight takes d5, so leave the knight on the board. Don't commit to taking the rook just yet. There was also queen takes d5. And then knight takes e6, take trade everything. Yeah, I liked queen takes d5 check. But nothing wrong with pawn at e6 check. So what's he going to do with the knight though? If the idea is e takes, or do you just pick up the rook? Go rook at f7 check first and then pick up the rook on a8. But like I said before, the idea of queen d2 is to make sure there's no counter-attack, of course, with moves like g3. So this is a bit fancy. What's the plan here? To cover the pawn on e6 so there's no queen takes e6 if he wants to pick up the other rook. I don't really think it matters. It's just finessing at this stage. He's got knight at g8 if king takes rook. So probably just rook takes bishop. So many threats. Knight at e6 check, bishop at g7 check. Alright, this is surely game over. How many times have I said that in the last 8 games? I only remember one real shock. That was the one where Art missed mates with black and then lost on time. So bishop at g5, you just keep harassing the queen. Knight at e5, rook takes f7. You can take the rook if you want. It's pretty hard to lose. Rook d8 check. Knight at f6 check. Yeah, okay, you can do it this way as well. No, rook d8 check, says Saturus. Yeah, he's just picking up lots of stuff with the initiative. Okay, scoreline is 5-4 in favor of Art. So 1 game to go to get us back to tie breaks. Same opening again. How many times is this now? 5 times? Are we going to see the same thing again? d3, knight e1. Was it something like bishop e3? Knight takes e2. Queen takes. Yep, same stuff again. So yeah, you notice Legion is keeping the bishop home on f8, not committing to bishop c5 or bishop b4 at this stage. Yep, same stuff again. Another idea which I haven't seen yet is to play bishop d7, bishop c6 if you have time. Because this bishop on c8 often doesn't do very much if you don't get a chance to push e6, e5. So, GSVC is saying you don't have to take on e2. There's also the idea to play knight f5. And then a move like bishop b4 would be really useful because you want to trade a knight and trade a bishop and then go knight at f2 check. Alright, Legion's done it. How did you think of that idea? So, would you consider sacking the bishop on g4 ever? Because even after the trade on e3, black really needs a knight on f2 to make any kind of a dent in white's position, it seems. Or there are possibilities like queen h4 or rook h4 to push away the queen. So perhaps sacking the bishop here loses too much time. What else could I suggest? Moving the bishop somewhere. Bishop back, bishop c1. Ask for a draw. So another choice for Legion, is he going to take or is he going to play knight h4 and sack on g2? But then do you go bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, threatening, queen takes h3? Wow, whoa, 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 hold on, what is this? Queen f6. Everyone's saying, wow. What a shock. I mean, I was expecting a more normal looking move like bishop b4, even bishop at b4. So making black cover f2. So a knight is really the piece that black wants. But he also has to get rid of this rook on f2. How does he do it? Slowly. Yeah, I mean, if the threat was knight takes h3, I suppose the other choice was bishop at g4, take, queen takes. Maybe that was not good enough. So with the king on g2, bishop knight in hand, it looks promising for black. I wouldn't say winning, but promising. I like the idea of bishop d6 too, as Saturus and GSVC are suggesting. So not committing anything off board yet. e5, but what do you do on knight cd5? Queen g5 check. You still got to cover c7. I don't know. What's the bad news, GSVC? What's the bad news? He wants to take on e3. I don't know. Is this so bad? Is he intending... I don't know what is intending here. e5, but then it's easily blocked with pawn at f5. I thought even bishop at f5 and get some more diagonals. Take, push the queen back. Again, maybe that's too slow as well. Alright, this is critical. This is it for Legion. He's got to defend against these threats on f7. Can't allow the same stuff as has previously occurred. So what happens on bishop takes, knight takes, bishop at h3, queen takes, rook takes. Knight c7 doesn't really look like it's doing anything. King d8. Rook takes d8. Rook takes f6, I mean. With this rook sitting on h3, he's got a knight in hand. Alright, what's stopping him playing bishop takes e6. Is this one of those funny art moves where he's trying to gain time with pawn at f5? Or perhaps he's trying to go knight cd5? But wow, he's allowing bishop at h3 check. And he's basically forcing Legion to go for it because Legion doesn't have any other moves. Like, Legion literally has no choice. He has to play bishop at h3 check, take. This check does nothing. So I think, why did I think there was a knight in hand? He hasn't taken a knight yet. Okay, that makes a big difference. Because I thought there'd be some knight at h4. Yeah, rook takes f6. So for some reason I thought Legion already had taken a knight. Well, maybe this move is okay if he follows up with rook takes f6. Alright, so what's the play for Legion? He's got 21 seconds. You can sack a rook and drop lots of pawns, and hopefully you get to take this rook with check. But by the time the king takes h4, then if, let's say, bishop at g5, the king's just going to back off. No, I'm afraid I have to call it. This is a what? Was it a slip? Bishop at g4. It's one of those funny art moves I don't understand. Come on, Legion, got to do something. Bishop at d7 in defense. Ah, this is insane. I don't understand what's going on. Rook takes h2. And queen takes queen h3, queen g3. Even that may not have been enough. Because 2 pawns, no, this is not enough. Oh, the bishop's blocked out anyway. No, this is over. Pawn at c7. Art's got too much time to figure this out. I mean, the queen could potentially be useful to defend backwards if Art misses something. But no, it's winning for white, completely winning for white. Yeah, knight takes c7. Still winning for white very easily. Yeah, alright, there's no hope now. He's got rook at c5 coming. Yeah, that's it. Made in one. So valiant effort from Legion. Oh, come on. Put him out of his misery. Yeah, that's it. 6-4. Art takes the match 6-4. GG's. Well played, Art. Yeah, some of these moves I didn't understand. But perhaps it was always winning for white in any case. This bishop at g4. Did anyone understand bishop at g4? Was it a slip? Did he know he was winning all along? Because, yeah, it did seem like bishop at d7 was necessary. I was suggesting before, the only chance would have been rook takes, king takes, queen h3 with the bishop open, king g1. What do you have? Two pawns and a bishop. 2 pawns and a bishop. And there's still maybe not enough. You can even take on g3 with check, but then whatever you put on h2, the king is hiding on h1. So that's what I saw before. And no, I don't see a forced mate for black here. And if there's no forced mate, then no, it's over. It's over. You need a knight to make progress. So thanks for following Beginner 1729. Let's just come back. Well, I mean, if this is lost for black, then it was lost a long time ago, I'm afraid. I'm not sure whether pawn takes e6 makes a difference. Perhaps it was a better try, pawn takes e6. Bishop at h2 check, says Genna, but with the king running to f2 and then to e2 next move, and the rook on f6 covering. Rook on f6 covering backwards. Some checks and hopes. Yeah, no, I think white is defending. So e5, this is the moment where I had two ideas. One of them was a bit too crazy to mention on the stream. Well, this is where we were suggesting bishop d6, or the previous move, wasn't it? There's also this idea to play rook h4 and push the queen back. Not sure whether it really achieves much if the queen comes back here. I was even thinking bishop at f5, take, and you got two more diagonals in hand. And then you can hopefully do something. Drop on h3 and sack a rook, and maybe even push f4 if that's check. I think that would have been a better hope than what we're suggesting at the end. So knight at g4. So was this Genna's prediction all the way back when Legion played knight at g4, and then he said, I have some bad news for Legion? Was that what you were talking about, knight at g4? Maybe bishop at g4 was better, considering what happened in the game, how useful a knight would have been. I don't know. I mean, the knight at g4 just came with a cheap trap to take on e3. Hard to say. Perhaps now bishop d6. Anyway, I'm going to stop here and go to bed. So, Art of Deception will be one of the 12 candidates. Let's just quickly take a look at where the bracket is. Elimination bracket round 7. Art takes the match over Legion 6-4, and there are 3 more candidate spots to be decided. Andrea Nakamura versus Master 10, and Lone Wolf to play winner of Penguin Antique Cubes, and Bugzilla to play the winner of Clearcast versus the winner of Cargalis and Rek. And that will be the longest match to get through all the way to round 7. So it still might take another 3 to 4 weeks to decide all the candidates. Anyway, thanks for watching. I think I've had enough for tonight. Enough excitement. Going to calm down before I go to bed. So have a good Sunday if it's still your Sunday. Otherwise, take care. See you next time.